Hello and welcome to Opinionated Marketers with Charles Nixon and me, Kiran Kapoor. Charles, we're going to talk about social media and particularly for B2B. You were saying before we started recording that you were a bit concerned about the attitude of some of your mentees and where perhaps they were putting their priorities on social media.
Yes, I think the main lesson is basically go for the what is the most effective area. But what came to my attention over the last couple of weeks is the inordinate amount of time that many businesses who are definitely in the B2B space are spending trying to attract a very small audience via social media. LinkedIn is the obvious one that they tend to be using, but they are using others as well. And when they've got maybe only 10, 15, 20 followers or users, and have been trying for some time, and are spending a large amount of time crafting blogs and posts and all sorts of elements. It is a disproportionate amount of resource that's being thrown at a subject just because it happens to have a high profile. And I believe you were talking to someone who is going to be on the main podcast about their use of social media, and the argument there was very much a case of where do you get your best bang for your buck. And I think a lot of social media posts are placed by companies who really are not looking at the return on their investment. Most companies, when they look at their Google Analytics, will find that social media leads to a small proportion of their leads, not a large proportion. The same, obviously, is true for advertising in general, that you are having a problem always tracking response rates that are specific. But where you can, you should do so. And I think it's important that we don't over capitalize areas that do not yield a reasonable response in terms of marketing spend.
I think it's an interesting one because I think sometimes we equate, we talk about it being vanity metrics. So we talk about the number of likes and engagement and followers as being the most important thing because it's the only thing we can measure with social media. But I do also think you have to listen to what your customers are saying. So if your customers are telling you that they saw something that you put out on social media, I saw your post on LinkedIn or your inquirers mentioned something you've done, then you are doing the right thing. And that is, it's not statistically trackable, but it tells you that something is going on, that people are noticing what you do. But it does very much depend on your audience. I mean, I run a marketing college. My audience tends to be quite switched on to social media, funnily enough. So it's not unreasonable for us to say, yes, we should have a media presence. If you were running a totally different business, you might want to think where your audience actually are.
Yes, if you get the posts, the likes, the retweets, etc., then that's fine. It's the case of actually expending money and not getting any of those things, and perhaps not even tracking them. Sentiment analysis also is an extremely useful way of seeing whether or not you're hitting the button. And I think there is still the emphasis that social media, in inverted commas, is all one big issue, and you just tackle it by throwing a resource at it. There is the same thing, historically speaking, with we must advertise. So you need to think very clearly about who you're going for, where they are, what their level of responsibility is, and indeed what response you get. And I think this is more true of B2B than necessarily of B2C, whereas things like Facebook and other social media can get mass audiences. In B2B, and those mass audiences just don't necessarily exist.
I think it's more a question, as you say, it's working out where your audience is, but also thinking about your target market. If your target market happens to be very small, very niche, then you need to reach that small niche area wherever they happen to be. And part of that is joining a conversation in it. One of the areas that I get concerned when I hear some of the students talking about social media is they've forgotten it's social. It's meant to be
Mm.
two-way. It's you are meant, and if you are going to do it, you've got to commit the time to spending time commenting on other people's information and posts. And I think that's where I see quite a disconnect. It's almost seen like it's part of the advertising that we do. So we stick out an advert, we stick out a social media post. Actually, social is social. You should be looking at it as a two-way thing.
Yes, it's a conversation. It's not a broadcast, and that's absolutely true. And then that's where it can be as good almost as sales, in terms of the fact that you are able to have an interaction with potential or indeed existing customers. And from that perspective, then obviously it builds into the element which everybody wants, which is the word of mouth side of things, which builds a reputation and grows a potential audience. I've got no problem with social media at all. I think the most important thing, though, is to look at the targeting and to use an old phrase, horses for courses.
It's also, to come back to your original point, it's working out how much time you're spending on it. And by that, I do not mean, and again, I'm starting to see this with some of our students, it's not difficult, we just get an AI to create stuff.
Mm.
There still needs to be a human element, and actually the AI can't like and comment on other people's posts. You still have to do that bit, and then you've got to work out, as you said, how much time is it worth spending on that. Bear in mind we have a finite amount of time at our disposal.
It would be interesting to hear of other listeners' ideas and responses, especially in the B2B world. I mean, when we talk about B2B, we talk about LinkedIn, occasionally Zing in the European context, but there must be others, alternative media to be used, specifically with the B2B world. And it would be interesting to hear of other people's experiences.
Lovely to speak to you, Charles, as ever.
Thank you. Bye bye.